Chapter 1. He rejected her 6 months ago. Now she was dying because of it. And tonight, she was about to crash his world. Tires screamed against the blistering asphalt. Neon lights blurred into streaks of violent purple and electric blue. Sloane jerked the steering wheel hard. Her matte black muscle car slammed into the silver sports car beside her. Metal shrieked. Sparks chewed through the night air. The silver car spun out of control, smashing through the barricades before grinding to a halt in a hiss of white smoke. Sloane ripped across the finish line. "Viper wins!" The announcer's voice blasted through the massive track speakers. The underground crowd erupted. Sloane kicked her door open and climbed onto the hood of her car. She didn't raise her hands in victory. She just stood there, breathing hard, looking down at the wreckage. "Sloane!" A frantic, high-pitched voice crackled in her earpiece. Pip, her chipmunk shifter mechanic and reluctant nurse. "Your heart rate is dropping to 50. You promised me 1 lap. Push the button, now." Sloane slipped her hand into her leather jacket pocket. Her fingers found the cold metal dial of the micro pacemaker strapped to her ribs. She cranked the dial up. A synthetic, agonizing jolt of electricity punched her chest. Her heart wasn't just weak. It was breaking itself apart, cell by cell. Every beat was a war she was losing. The exhaustion was crushing her, eating her from the inside out, but she swallowed the blood tasting in her mouth and forced a bright, arrogant smile. Suddenly, the crowd's cheering died. The deafening roar of helicopter blades swallowed the stadium. A sleek black chopper hovered above the track, its blinding searchlight pinning Sloane against the dark. It touched down 50 yards away. The side door slid open. Vaughn Kincaid stepped out. The Silver Crest Alpha King didn't wear a leather jacket or riding boots. He wore a flawless, tailor-made gray suit. Not a single crease. He moved with the terrifying stillness of an apex predator. The temperature in the arena instantly plummeted. The crowd parted. Shifters dropped their gazes to the floor. No one dared speak. Sloane didn't look away. She locked her eyes on his. Vaughn stopped at the edge of her headlights. His face was a mask of carved marble, cold, regal, untouchable. But his hands, hanging by his sides, curled into fists so tight the leather of his gloves strained. "Get down, Sloane," Vaughn ordered. His voice was quiet, but it vibrated through the soles of her boots. "My track, my rules," Sloane said. Her voice rang out, clear and mocking. "I like the view up here." Vaughn took a slow step forward. "I wired $1 million into your account 3 days ago. It came with a strict condition. You leave this territory and you never return." "Oh, I saw the transfer," Sloane laughed. It was a sharp, jagged sound that hid her agony. $1 million severance package for a rejected mate. Very generous, Your Highness. So generous, I used it to buy this entire underground circuit. She spread her arms wide, gesturing to the neon-lit arena. "I didn't leave," she whispered, her eyes flashing with defiance. "I moved in." Vaughn's jaw tightened. A dangerous shadow crossed his eyes. "You are playing a lethal game." "You bought my absence, Vaughn," she spat back. "You don't get to dictate my hobbies." "I am trying to keep you alive. By paying me off? By tossing me aside like garbage?" She leaned forward. "Look at me and tell me you didn't choose your pristine throne over us." For half a second, he almost broke. His hand twitched, lifting a fraction of an inch, like he was about to rip her off that hood and crush her against him until she stopped breathing like she was dying. His golden eyes flared with absolute terrifying possession. But then, he stopped. He swallowed hard. The ice returned. Before Sloane could hurl another insult, the crumpled door of the silver sports car was kicked off its hinges. Thatcher crawled out of the wreckage. The young alpha wiped a streak of soot from his forehead. He ignored his uncle entirely and marched straight toward Sloane's car. "Thatcher," Vaughn warned. The air crackled. Frost began to spiderweb across the asphalt beneath Vaughn's shoes. Thatcher didn't stop. He walked right up to the hood of Sloane's car and dropped to one knee. "You drove flawlessly," Thatcher said, looking up at her. Sloane frowned. "I ran you off the road, kid." "You proved your dominance," Thatcher corrected. He stood up and finally turned to face his uncle. He didn't flinch against the king's crushing aura. Instead, Thatcher grabbed the cuff of his own jacket and ripped his sleeve back. A glowing silver insignia pulsed on his wrist. It wasn't a natural wolf mark. It radiated a blinding, artificial purity. Vaughn stopped breathing. The frost around his feet shattered into jagged spikes. "What did you do?" Vaughn's voice dropped to a lethal whisper. "I took what you threw away," Thatcher declared, his chin held high. "You abandoned your destined mate because you deemed her unworthy of the crown. But the light demands order. High Priestess Opaline blessed this union." "Opaline is a parasite manipulating a boy," Vaughn snarled, taking a threatening step forward. "Remove that mark now." "I am her protector now," Thatcher shouted, stepping between Vaughn and Sloane. "The light chose me to guide her. She doesn't need a monster who pays his mate to disappear." "Are you two done?" Sloane interrupted. She jumped off the hood of the car. Her boots hit the asphalt. It was a mistake. The impact sent a shockwave of pure agony through her spine. The pacemaker sputtered. "Sloane," Pip screamed in her ear. "Red zone. Vitals are crashing. You have a massive pressure drop." Sloane ignored the voice. She glared at Thatcher, then at Vaughn. "I am not a prize to be traded, and I sure as hell don't belong to the light." She took a step toward Vaughn. She wanted to push him. She wanted to strike that perfect, arrogant face. "You severed the bond, Vaughn," she sneered, her vision blurring at the edges. "You don't get to play the jealous ex." "Sloane, stop moving," Vaughn commanded, the ice in his voice cracking. "Don't touch." Her voice cut out. Her lungs locked. A violent spasm ripped through her chest. This wasn't pain anymore. This was her body shutting down. Piece by piece, she doubled over, clutching her throat. "Sloane!" Thatcher lunged forward. She shoved him away, gasping for air that wouldn't come. A terrible tearing sensation erupted in her throat. She coughed violently. It wasn't air. A single crystallized snow petal fell from her lips. It hit the dark asphalt, dissolving into a mist of frothy, glowing crimson blood. Stage 4. Complete organ collapse. Sloane's knees gave out, and the neon lights of the track faded into absolute black. Chapter 2. She never felt the impact. Before her knees could hit the asphalt, Vaughn was there. He moved faster than sight, catching her completely. The raw, terrifying power of the Alpha King exploded outward. A shockwave of pure, freezing air blasted across the track. Thatcher lunged forward. "Get away from her!" Vaughn didn't even look at his nephew. He just threw out a hand. The impact of his aura echoed like a thunderclap. Thatcher was thrown backward, skidding 10 feet across the pavement before going completely still. "Start the chopper," Vaughn roared to his pilot, his voice cracking with a panic no one had ever heard before. He didn't care about the crowd. He didn't care about his pristine suit getting stained with the bloody froth on her lips. He pulled Sloane tight against his chest, shielding her frail body from the cold night air, and carried her away. The deafening roar of the rotors faded. Silence rushed in, heavy and suffocating. Sloane gasped, her eyes snapping open. She wasn't on the track anymore. She was lying on a plush velvet sofa in the center of the Glass Bell Tower, the highest, most restricted sanctuary in the Silver Crest territory. Moonlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting sharp, shattered shadows across the marble floor. Vaughn stood by the glass, his back to her. He was staring out over the city. "Take me back," Sloane rasped. Her throat burned. Vaughn didn't turn. "No. You don't own me." She forced herself up. The world spun dangerously. "You paid for the right to never see my face again." "Sloane!" Pip's frantic voice shattered the quiet in her earpiece. "You're awake. Listen to me." The pressure drop was catastrophic. The sickness is in its final stage. Your heart is operating at 20% capacity. You have 60 minutes before total failure. 60 minutes. Sloane ripped the earpiece out. She didn't want a countdown. She wanted out. She stumbled forward. "Call your pilot. I am leaving." Vaughn finally turned. His mask of indifference was gone. His jaw was clenched so hard it looked like it might snap. "You are not stepping foot outside this tower. Watch me." She shoved him. It was a weak, trembling push against a solid wall of muscle, but he staggered back as if she had hit him with a truck. "Let me go," Sloane yelled, grabbing the lapels of his ruined gray suit. She yanked hard, desperate to get around him. The fabric of his silk shirt tore open. Sloane froze. Her breath hitched. She stared at his exposed chest. It wasn't skin. Beneath his collarbone, spreading wildly toward his heart, was a jagged, beautiful sheet of pure crystal frost. It glowed with a sickening, ethereal light, piercing his flesh. It wasn't just on his skin. It was growing inside him. Vaughn quickly pulled the torn fabric together, his eyes flashing away from hers. "What is that?" Sloane whispered. Her anger vanished, replaced by a cold, terrifying dread. "Vaughn, what is inside you?" "Nothing that concerns you." "A lie," a voice echoed through the glass chamber. It was soft, sweet, absolutely toxic. The moonlight shifted. A blinding, warm glow flooded the room, carrying the overwhelming scent of holy lilies. The light pooled in the center of the floor, rising and taking shape. High Priestess Opaline stood before them, a flawless illusion of pure, radiant energy. She wore a pristine white gown, her face a picture of serene, tragic pity. "Get out of my tower, Opaline." "Why?" Vaughn growled. His voice dropped to a lethal frequency. "I only came to admire my masterpiece." Opaline sighed, gliding forward. She didn't look at Vaughn. Her eyes locked onto Sloane. "He didn't pay you to leave because he despised you, little wolf. He paid you because he was trying to save you." Sloane shook her head. "No, he broke the bond." "He had to." Opaline smiled gently. "The purge curse is quite poetic. Human love is a dirty, primal instinct. The light demands order. The curse ensures that the deeper an alpha loves his fated mate, the faster his heart crystallizes into perfect, unfeeling ice." Sloane stopped breathing. She looked at Vaughn's chest, then at his eyes. "If he kept you," Opaline continued, her voice dripping with fake sympathy, "he would have frozen to death in days. And without her alpha, a mate dies anyway. So he severed the tie. He broke your heart, hoping it would stop the ice." "It didn't," Vaughn stated coldly, stepping between Sloane and the illusion. "Now leave." "Of course it didn't," Opaline laughed softly, "because he never stopped loving you, Sloane. And now, you are both dying." The golden illusion shattered into a million specks of dust, leaving the room in devastating silence. Sloane stared at Vaughn's back. He didn't choose his throne. He chose her life. He let her hate him so she could breathe. "You idiot," Sloane choked out. Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Vaughn turned around. He looked exhausted. The regal king was completely gone. I couldn't watch you die, Sloane. So you let me die slowly, believing I was nothing to you? She marched up to him. She didn't push him this time. She pressed her palm flat against the jagged crystal on his chest. It was agonizingly cold. Sloane, don't touch it, he warned, trying to pull away. She gripped his shirt tight. We have 59 minutes before my organs shut down. If we stay out here, we both die. There is no cure. Not in this world, Sloane said. Her eyes began to glow. A blinding, ethereal silver light spilled from her pupils. The air around them warped and hummed. She was a dream walker. If reality offered no salvation, she would tear open a new one. What are you doing? Vaughn demanded, grabbing her arms. I am cashing in that $1 million, Sloane whispered fiercely. She closed her eyes and pulled him down. We're going in. Chapter 3. Gravity vanished. A blinding flash of silver devoured the world, followed by the deafening sound of a heartbeat. Thump. Sloane's boots hit solid ground. She opened her eyes. They weren't in the dark, blood-stained racing arena. They weren't in the velvet-lined bell tower. They were standing in the center of a colossal cathedral. It was breathtaking. The pillars, the floor, the towering arches, everything was carved from flawless sunlit glass. Prisms of golden light danced across the vast empty space. It was a realm of pure, untainted aesthetic. But it wasn't safe. Crack. A sound like a gunshot echoed through the sanctuary. A massive fissure ripped across the glass ceiling above them. The dreamscape is collapsing, Vaughn said. He was standing 10 feet away, his eyes scanning the fracturing walls. In this world, the crystal frost hadn't just consumed his chest. It was crawling up his throat, locking his movements in rigid perfection. Your mind is too weak to hold the construct, Sloane. Sever the link. Not until we find it, Sloane gasped. The pain in her chest had followed her here. Every breath felt like inhaling shattered glass. Your soul core. Opaline hid it in here. We break the core. We break the curse. You don't have the time, Vaughn shouted. Crack. Another jagged line tore through the floor beneath her boots. I have 45 minutes, she shot back, stumbling forward. Help me look. I am not letting you die for me. Vaughn crossed the distance in a blur. He didn't just grab her arm. He drove her backward. Her spine hit a towering glass statue of a kneeling wolf. He boxed her in, planting his hands on the frozen glass on either side of her head. The impact knocked the breath from her lungs. She looked up. He was so close. This wasn't the distant, untouchable Alpha King anymore. He was unraveling. The flawless mask was gone, replaced by raw, primal desperation. His chest heaved against hers. The freezing temperature of the crystal curse radiating from his skin crashed into the burning, unnatural fever of her mate's sickness. Ice met fire. The air between them literally hissed with steam. Send us back, Vaughn ordered, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that sent a shiver straight down her spine. Now. Sloane didn't flinch. She tilted her chin up, refusing to back down from the overwhelming dominance in his golden eyes. Make me. Vaughn squeezed his eyes shut, a muscle feathered in his jaw. The frost creeping up his throat thickened. Sloane, please. Look at you, she whispered, her voice dropping to a trembling ache. She lifted a shaking hand and pressed it against his cheek. He hissed at the contact, but he didn't pull away. He leaned into her palm. You're freezing from the inside out. You pushed me away to save me, but you're dying alone in the dark. It was the only way to keep you breathing. I am not breathing, she screamed, hitting his chest. The sound echoed wildly through the breaking cathedral. My heart is failing. My blood is toxic. You didn't save me, Vaughn. You just made sure we died apart. Crack. A massive chunk of the glass ceiling plummeted, shattering into sparkling dust a few feet away. The cathedral was screaming. The countdown was ending. Vaughn opened his eyes. The golden ring of his alpha iris was drowning in sorrow. He dropped his forehead against her shoulder. The mighty king, completely defeated. "I let you go," he whispered, his voice finally breaking. The hot breath on her neck sent a jolt of electricity straight to her failing heart. "I broke my own soul to let you go. Why did you come back to die?" Sloane's vision blurred with unshed tears. She wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her fingers into his hair. "Because I'd rather shatter with you," she sobbed fiercely, "than live safe and hollow." Behind Vaughn, inside the chest of the giant glass wolf, a blinding light pulsed, the soul core. It was entirely frozen. A beautiful, tragic heart trapped in opaline's ice. Sloane didn't waste another second. She grabbed Vaughn's face, forcing him to look at her. "Wake up, Vaughn." She pulled him down. Their lips crashed together. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was desperate, violent, a collision of two dying souls claiming what was rightfully theirs. The moment their mouths met, a shockwave of golden scorching heat erupted from their bodies. The bond, dormant and battered, roared to life. The heat melted the frost on his lips. It scorched the ice in her veins. It was the purest form of alpha possession, violently rejecting the holy magic that tried to cage it. Behind them, the glass wolf glowed like a dying star. Boom! The soul core exploded. The entire cathedral shattered. Billions of crystal shards rained down in slow motion, catching the golden light of their bond. The dream world dissolved into absolute white. Sloane's eyes snapped open in the real world. The cold floor of the bell tower hit her back. Vaughn was directly above her, his chest heaving, his eyes wide and burning with molten gold. The jagged frost on his skin was melting, dripping away like ordinary water. Before either of them could speak, a deafening crash ripped through the silence. The reinforced glass doors of the sanctuary imploded. Shards of safety glass rained down over them. Thatcher stood in the ruined doorway. His eyes were completely white, stripped of their pupils. In his hands he gripped a massive glowing silver war hammer. Behind him the night was lit by the torches of 100 light guards. "The beast has corrupted her," Thatcher roared, pointing the hammer straight at Vaughn's heart. "Purge them both." Chapter 4. The glass dust hadn't even settled. Vaughn was already on his feet. He didn't just stand, he eclipsed the room. The melting frost on his chest evaporated into a terrifying golden mist. The Alpha King wasn't dying anymore. He was furious. He shoved Sloane behind him, shielding her frail body from the ruined doorway. Thatcher stepped over the shattered glass, his silver armor clanking in the heavy silence. Behind him, 100 light guards formed a perfect blinding wall of white and silver. Their spears were lowered, ready to execute. "You have tainted the crown," Thatcher said. His voice didn't sound like a young, arrogant boy anymore. It was hollow, eerie, a puppet speaking through opaline's strings. "Put the lance down, Thatcher," Vaughn commanded. The floor beneath his boots groaned under the weight of his aura. "You are my blood. Do not make me break you." "Your blood is corrupted," Thatcher yelled, his entirely white eyes flashing. "You chose a diseased mortal bond over the eternal purity of the light. The High Priestess has ordered your purge." Sloane clutched Vaughn's torn shirt. Her heart fluttered dangerously, a jagged, painful rhythm. The dreamscape had awakened their bond, but her body was still breaking. She needed the physical mate bite to cure the sickness, and they were out of time. "He's not himself," Sloane gasped, staring at Thatcher's vacant eyes. "Vaughn, look at the air above him." Vaughn didn't need to look. He could smell it, the sickeningly sweet scent of holy lilies. Opaline's magic was wrapped around his nephew's mind like a parasite. "I challenge you," Thatcher roared, slamming the butt of his silver lance against the marble floor. "An alpha duel, for the throne, for the right to cleanse this territory." A duel. The sacred, unbreakable law of the wolves. Once challenged, an alpha could not refuse without forfeiting his title and his life. "Accepted," Vaughn said coldly. "No," Sloane grabbed his arm. "He's heavily armed. You have nothing." Vaughn didn't look at her. He didn't take his eyes off the boy. "I don't need a weapon to discipline a child," Thatcher charged. It wasn't a fight. It was a tragic, violent dance. Thatcher thrust the silver lance forward, aiming directly for Vaughn's heart. The tip glowed with searing white magic. Vaughn didn't draw his claws. He didn't shift. He merely stepped aside. The heavy blade missed him by a fraction of an inch, shattering a marble pillar behind him. "Fight me!" Thatcher screamed, swinging the weapon in a deadly, sweeping arc. Vaughn ducked under the blow. He grabbed Thatcher's wrist and twisted, using the boy's own momentum to slam him into the glass wall. The impact rattled the entire tower. "Wake up, Thatcher," Vaughn roared in his face. "You are a silver crest. Stop acting like a lapdog for a false god." "The light is absolute," Thatcher snarled, kicking Vaughn in the chest. Vaughn stumbled back, his boots skidding on the broken glass. He was holding back. He was defending, parrying, dodging. But he absolutely refused to land a lethal strike. Every time he had an opening to snap Thatcher's neck or end the fight permanently, he pulled his punch. Sloane watched in agony. Her knees buckled. The pacemaker in her chest beeped a frantic dying warning. This isn't a duel, she realized, her vision swimming. It's a trap. Opaline knew Vaughn wouldn't kill his own nephew. She was using the boy to wear him down. "Vaughn!" "Behind the guards!" Sloane screamed, her voice cracking. The wall of white soldiers parted. High Priestess Opaline walked through. She didn't float like an illusion this time. She was flesh and blood, wearing a crown of white gold. Her smile was devastatingly cruel. Thatcher let out a feral battle cry and lunged for a final desperate strike. He drove the silver lance straight at Vaughn's throat. Vaughn didn't dodge. He stepped directly into the attack. The silver blade sliced through the fabric of his ruined shirt, grazing deep into his shoulder. But the strike was stopped. Vaughn grabbed the shaft of the lance with his bare hands. The holy silver burned his palms, hissing and smoking, but his grip was absolute iron. He yanked the weapon out of Thatcher's hands, disarming him completely. With a swift, brutal kick to the chest, he sent his nephew flying backward onto the floor. The boy was disarmed. The duel was over. Vaughn stood tall, holding the glowing silver lance. Blood ran down his arm, but his golden eyes were locked onto Opaline. "Your puppet failed. Leave my territory." Opaline didn't look angry. She didn't look defeated. She simply raised her hand. "Oh, Vaughn," she whispered, her voice carrying over the silence like a death sentence. "You were always too sentimental." She snapped her fingers. Sloane saw it before it happened. The silver lance in Vaughn's hands began to vibrate. The metal cracked, exposing a core of blinding, unstable crystal light. "Vaughn, drop it!" Sloane screamed. It was too late. The weapon detonated. It wasn't a fiery explosion. It was a massive, concussive blast of pure crystal shards and blinding white energy. The shock wave ripped through the room. Vaughn was thrown backward through the air, crashing violently into the stone altar. He didn't get up. Vaughn! Sloane crawled forward, dragging her failing body across the glass. Heavy, elegant footsteps stopped inches from her face. Sloane looked up. Opaline stood over her, the hem of her pristine white gown glowing in the moonlight. The priestess looked down at Sloane with utter disgust. "Don't worry, little wolf," Opaline smiled gently, raising a hand glowing with deadly, blinding magic. "You won't remember him when you die." Chapter 5. "A complete memory wipe," Opaline whispered, her voice practically humming with holy power. The white light in her hand grew blinding, casting harsh, angelic shadows across her face. "A small mercy, little wolf. You will die not knowing you were ever loved. You will die clean." Sloane tasted blood. Her chest hitched in a violent, rattling breath. The pacemaker under her ribs let out a frantic, high-pitched warning. 30 seconds. She was out of time. But she wasn't looking at the priestess. Sloane looked past the blinding white light. Across the ruined marble floor, Vaughn was buried under a pile of shattered crystal and heavy stone. He wasn't moving. "Look at me," Opaline commanded. "No," Sloane rasped. She didn't retreat. She didn't cower. With the absolute last shred of adrenaline in her failing body, Sloane threw herself forward. She scrambled over the jagged glass, ignoring the sharp cuts tearing at her jeans and palms. "Stop her!" Opaline shrieked, her serene mask slipping. The light guards lunged, their spears aimed at Sloane's back, but they were too late. Sloane crashed into Vaughn's side. She grabbed the collar of his ruined shirt and dragged his heavy frame upward, pulling him flush against her chest. "Vaughn," she choked out, burying her face into his neck. "Wake up. Claim me." His skin was freezing. The concussive blast had jump-started the curse again. A fresh sheet of jagged blue-white frost was racing up his throat. "Sloane," Vaughn groaned. His golden eyes flickered open, hazy and weak. He tried to push her away. "Run. It's too cold." "I am not leaving you in the dark, Sloane," she sobbed fiercely, wrapping her arms tighter around his freezing torso. "Burn it down, Vaughn. Burn it all down." She unleashed every ounce of her Dreamwalker energy. She didn't try to build a new world. She channeled it directly into the broken, shattered bond between them. The reaction was instantaneous. It started as a spark. A heavy, intoxicating scent of cedarwood, ozone, and impending rain flooded the air, instantly suffocating Opaline's sickly, sweet lily perfume. Then came the heat. It wasn't a physical fire. It was a suffocating tropical wave of pure alpha pheromones. The temperature in the bell tower didn't just rise, it skyrocketed. The freezing air cracked. The marble floor began to steam. "Tear them apart," Opaline screamed, hurling a massive sphere of white holy fire at their intertwined bodies. The holy fire struck them and dissolved into harmless white smoke. An invisible pulsing dome of golden energy had erupted around Sloane and Vaughn. It was the absolute raw power of a king finding his mate. Vaughn stopped shaking. The crushing frost on his throat didn't just melt. It vaporized. It turned into a torrential rain of glittering golden stardust that drifted beautifully around them. He wrapped his massive arms around her waist, crushing her against him. The lethargy vanished. His muscles bunched with terrifying apex predator strength. "Mine," Vaughn growled. The word wasn't spoken. It vibrated through the floorboards. It rattled the weapons in the guards' hands. It was an absolute decree of nature. Vaughn tilted Sloane's head to the side. His golden eyes locked onto hers, blazing with an ancient, untamed fire. "Do it," she whispered, her heart barely beating. He buried his face in the crook of her neck. His teeth sank into her shoulder. It wasn't a wound. It was an anchor. A massive electrical surge of pure life force ripped from his body and poured directly into hers. Sloane gasped. Her spine arched. The mate bite. The agony in her chest vanished. The toxic, starving cells in her blood flared to life, feeding on the absolute certainty of his claim. Beep, beep, beep. The pacemaker strapped to her ribs let out a rapid, confused sequence of noises, and then it shut off completely. It wasn't needed anymore. Beneath her ribs, her real heart gave a massive, thunderous thud. Then another, strong, healthy, unbreakable. The mate's sickness was completely, utterly eradicated. Opaline stood outside the golden dome, her jaw trembling. Her pristine white gown was stained with ash. Her crown of light was flickering. "Disgusting!" the priestess shrieked, scratching at her own face. The flawless, holy illusion was cracking, revealing the bitter, envious monster underneath. "You choose the dirt. You choose the filth of an animal bond over perfection." Vaughn pulled back from Sloane's neck. He stood up, pulling Sloane up with him. He kept one arm firmly wrapped around her waist, locking her to his side. He didn't look like a wounded king anymore. He looked like a god of war. "My territory, my mate," Vaughn said. His voice was terrifyingly calm. He raised his free hand. The golden stardust swirling around them ignited. It swept outward in a blinding, concussive wave of heat and dominance. The light guards dropped their spears and fell to their knees, clutching their ears as the alpha aura crushed their willpower to dust. The wave hit Opaline. "No," she screamed. The golden fire didn't burn her flesh, it burned her magic. It violently rejected her holy parasitic energy from the Silver Crest land. Her physical form began to disintegrate into shards of blinding white light. "You think you've won?" Opaline's voice distorted, echoing from everywhere at once as her body fell apart. "The light never surrenders. We adapt." In her final fraction of a second, the priestess's remaining essence condensed into a single, razor-sharp beam of light. It didn't shoot at Vaughn. It didn't shoot at Sloane. It shot straight across the room, striking the unconscious body of Thatcher. The beam sank directly into the young boy's chest. Thatcher arched his back violently, a silent scream tearing from his lips, before he collapsed entirely, dead to the world. The golden light faded. The bell tower fell, completely silent. Chapter 6. The first ray of dawn pierced the shattered glass of the bell tower. It wasn't the blinding, sterile magic of the high priestess. It was real sunlight, warm, golden, unforgiving. The suffocating scent of holy lilies had completely vanished, replaced by the crisp, biting air of the mountain and the overwhelming protective cedarwood scent of the Alpha King. The light guards didn't try to fight. The destruction of Opaline's physical form had severed their blind devotion. They looked at the ruined marble floor, then up at Vaughn. Slowly, one by one, the soldiers clad in pristine white armor dropped to their knees. They bowed their heads, yielding to the absolute terrifying power of the true sovereign. Vaughn didn't even look at them. His massive hand was still wrapped securely around Sloane's waist, anchoring her to his side. His thumb gently brushed the fresh, golden-scarred bite mark on the crook of her neck. "Are you in pain?" he whispered, his voice a rough, exhausted rumble. Sloane took a deep breath. Her lungs expanded fully for the first time in 6 months. No rattling, no tearing. Beneath her ribs, her heart beat with a steady, ferocious rhythm. The mate sickness wasn't just gone. She felt practically invincible, humming with the shared vitality of his alpha blood. "Never again," Sloane answered softly. She looked up into his golden eyes. The ice was completely gone. A heavy, shifting sound broke the quiet. Across the room, Thatcher pushed himself out of the rubble. The silver armor he wore was dented and scorched. The holy lance lay broken in 2 pieces beside him. Vaughn's jaw tightened. He took a half-step forward, shielding Sloane. "Thatcher!" The boy didn't attack. He didn't yell. He just stood there, swaying slightly. His eyes were no longer glowing white, but they weren't his normal color either. They were dull, vacant. Thatcher looked at his hands, then at the kneeling guards, and finally at Vaughn. "You chose the dirt," Thatcher whispered. His voice lacked any emotion. It was chillingly calm. "You let the kingdom rot for a girl." "I saved the kingdom from a parasite," Vaughn corrected coldly. "Stand down, Thatcher. The priestess is dead." "The light doesn't die, Uncle," Thatcher replied. He didn't sound like a brainwashed zealot anymore. He sounded like a prophet delivering a weather report. "It just finds a new vessel." Thatcher reached up and unclasped the heavy silver cloak of the light guard. He let it drop to the floor. Then he reached into his pocket, pulled out the silver crest insignia, the badge of his royal bloodline, and tossed it onto the shattered glass. It landed with a hollow clatter. "Keep the throne," Thatcher said, turning his back on them. "I have work to do." He walked past the kneeling guards, stepping over the threshold and disappearing into the cold morning mist. Sloane shivered, a sudden, inexplicable sense of dread washing over her. "We shouldn't let him leave. Something is wrong with him." "He is exiled," Vaughn stated, pulling her closer against his chest. "If he sets foot on this mountain again, he is an enemy of the crown. But today no more blood is spilled." Vaughn turned her gently in his arms, forcing her to look away from the empty doorway and out toward the horizon. The sprawling city of the Silver Crest territory was bathed in the morning light. It was hers now. She was no longer a rejected street racer. She was the queen. "You owe me $1 million, Sloane murmured, a tired, genuine smile finally touching her lips as she rested her head against his chest. Vaughn let out a low, breathless laugh, a sound she hadn't heard in years. He kissed the top of her head, wrapping his arms around her like an unbreakable fortress. "You can have the entire treasury, little wolf." It was perfect. The air was calm. The war was over. The curse was broken. Sloane closed her eyes, letting the absolute security of her alpha's embrace wash away the trauma of the night. Then she felt it. A vibration. It didn't come from the shattered glass floor. It came from the pocket of her leather jacket. Click. A faint, synthetic hum vibrated against her hip. Sloane frowned. She slowly pulled back from Vaughn's chest. "What is it?" he asked, sensing the immediate shift in her demeanor. Sloane didn't answer. She reached into her pocket. Her fingers brushed against cold metal and cracked plastic. She pulled it out. The micro pacemaker. It was supposed to be dead. The electrical circuit had shorted out the moment the mate bite healed her heart. It was a useless piece of garbage now, but the cracked digital screen was glowing. Beep. A green, jagged line spiked across the tiny monitor. 75 beats per minute. Her heartbeat. Steady, calm, normal. Sloane stared at it, confused. It turned itself back on. "Throw it away," Vaughn said, reaching out to take the device from her hand. "You don't need it anymore." "Wait," Sloane breathed, pulling her hand back. Her blood ran ice cold. Beep. The green line spiked again, but immediately after it, a second line materialized on the bottom half of the screen. Beep, 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 beep. It wasn't green. The pixels were glowing a blinding, unnatural white. 150 beats per minute. It was fast, frantic, tiny. "Sloane," Vaughn's voice dropped, thick with sudden alarm. Sloane couldn't speak. She couldn't breathe. Her wide, terrified eyes slowly drifted down from the glowing screen in her hand to her own body. Through the torn fabric of her shirt, directly over her lower stomach, a faint light was pulsing. It matched the frantic, tiny rhythm on the screen perfectly. Beep, 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 beep. It wasn't the golden light of an alpha. It wasn't the silver light of a dreamwalker. It was a sickly sweet, brilliant white glow. It smelled faintly, terrifyingly, of holy lilies. Opaline hadn't just sent her magic into Thatcher. She had hidden her most potent parasitic seed in the only place Vaughn's protective aura couldn't burn it away. Inside the new life growing in the Queen's womb. Beep, beep. Sloane looked up at Vaughn, absolute horror shattering the morning peace. "Vaughn," she whispered.